Welcome to the Nourish to Thrive podcast, faith-forward, science-backed strategies for women who want more energy, less weight, and real answers. I'm your host, Tanya Pennington-Miller, a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and functional blood chemistry specialist with a master's degree in applied clinical nutrition. If you're tired of feeling dismissed by your doctor, confused by your labs, and stuck in survival mode, you're in the right place. Here, we simplify the science. We get to the root, and we anchor it all in truth, because God made your body to heal and thrive, not just survive. It just needs the right kind of support and less noise. Hello, my friend. Welcome into the Nourish to Thrive podcast. I'm so glad you're back with me today. So we are kicking off a brand new month, and we're going to start August the same way that we started last month, with a Q&A episode. So if you were here for that one, you know that I am loving this format because these questions are coming directly from you. And I just love being able to serve and to show up for you in a way that you are actually needing right now in real time. So I've got 3 questions for you that I picked today, and I think they're really great ones. And I do want to say that I received quite a few questions, and narrowing them down to 3 was genuinely pretty hard because you're asking some really great questions. So here's what I try to do for these episodes. I try to narrow it down to the questions where I received multiple questions on that same topic, because that just tells me that it's something that a lot of us are sitting with right now and needing some help with. So if your question did not make the cut for today's episode, please keep sending them in, because the Q&A format is something that I really want to keep doing, and your questions are, quite frankly, shaping it. So keep sending them in, okay? All right, let's get into what I have for today. The first question is, my LDL cholesterol went up in perimenopause, even though I eat well and I exercise. My doctor wants to put me on a statin. Is this hormonal, and what should I actually be asking for before I agree to that? Okay, I love this question. And I get this type of question from women in midlife so often that I actually decided that it deserves its own series. Okay, so we're going to spend the rest of August doing a deep dive on cholesterol as it pertains to women in midlife. Okay, so today I'm going to give you just enough to be dangerous here, but I want you to come back for the rest of the series that we'll be doing for the last 3 Thursdays of this month, okay, for our deep dive. So let me start with the statin portion of the question, okay, because I have a lot to say here. The research on statins for primary prevention, meaning for women who have not already had a heart attack or a cardiovascular event, is actually very weak. Most of the landmark statin research was conducted on middle-aged men. Are we surprised? The data does not translate to women the way that it has been applied to women. And for women specifically, the case for a statin is just not as strong as it is often presented. They come with real side effects. We're talking muscle pain, fatigue, cognitive issues. They deplete our CoQ10, which is so critical for mitochondrial energy production. And yet women are being put on statins routinely based on a number on a lab report without a deeper conversation about what that number actually means. And here's what I mean by that. Yes, this is hormonal. Estrogen plays a significant role in our cholesterol metabolism. And one of the things it does is it helps to maintain favorable cholesterol ratios. So as estrogen declines in perimenopause, it is very common to see LDL rise. And many women end up looking at their diet as if there's something that they need to change there. Maybe that sounds familiar to you. Not knowing that it's actually their hormonal environment that is driving this rise in LDL. So here's what's happening. Estrogen signals your liver to produce more LDL receptors, which they're like the docking stations that your liver uses to pull LDL out of your bloodstream and break it down. So when estrogen is in a healthy range, your liver is actively clearing LDL from circulation, and that's a really good thing. When estrogen declines, as it does, especially in later perimenopause, and then of course, once we're in menopause, the liver gets that signal less. So fewer LDL receptors are produced, less LDL is being cleared, and the levels in your blood is going to rise. It's not that your body is suddenly producing more cholesterol. It is that the clearance mechanism has slowed down. And that's a really important distinction because it completely changes how you should be thinking about what to do next. So, before we do anything or make any decisions, I want to know the full picture. Because here's the thing about LDL, it only tells us so much. Think of it this way. Knowing your total LDL number is a little like being told how many cars are on the highway. It's just a count. It doesn't tell you anything about what kind of cars they are, how fast they're going, how likely they are to cause a problem. The number gives you something, but it does not give you the information you actually need to understand what is really going on. And this is why the conversation around cholesterol needs to go so much deeper than a single number on a standard lipid panel. So, the first thing that I would ask your doctor to add, especially if they are trying to have a statin conversation with you, is I would ask them to add ApoB. ApoB stands for apolipoprotein B. Now, every atherogenic particle in your blood, meaning every particle that has the potential to cause arterial damage, carries one ApoB molecule on its surface. So ApoB tells you how many of the heavy vehicles are on that highway. Okay, the semis, the delivery trucks, the overloaded flatbeds, like the ones that if you get next to them, you try to speed up a little bit just to get away from them, right? I mean, that's what I do. So now we're not talking just total traffic count. Now we've got some more information. And cardiologists are starting to actually consider ApoB more predictive of cardiovascular risk than total LDL because it counts all the atherogenic particles, not just one type. And yet somehow standard lipid panels still default to total LDL as a primary marker, which is a conversation the cardiology world is slowly starting to have, but has just not yet made its way to the most routine doctor appointments. All right. And then the most complete picture, if you really want to go a step further, again, if you're having this serious conversation with your doctor, before agreeing to do anything, I want you to ask them, in addition to that ApoB, that you also want them to order an NMR lipid profile. N as in Nancy, M as in Mary, R as in Roger, okay? NMR stands for nuclear magnetic resonance. Now, if ApoB tells you how many dangerous vehicles are on the road, the NMR tells you about their size, tells you about their speed, tells you what each one of them are carrying. Because this test is going to measure not just how many LDL particles you have, but how big or small they are. And this matters like enormously. So in this case, large, very buoyant LDL particles are actually far less concerning cardiovascularly than small, dense LDL particles. Okay, the small, dense LDL is the kind that gets oxidized, that gets lodged into arterial walls, and it drives the inflammatory cascade that we're actually worried about in terms of cardiovascular health. So the large, fluffy LDL is much more benign. And a standard lipid panel does not tell you which type you have. Okay, only an NMR does. So I want you to think of the big particles as like big beach balls. And if you throw it around a room, it's going to kind of just like hit all the walls and bounce off. And really, it's not going to get stuck anywhere. But if I'm now throwing a small, dense golf ball, when I throw it, if I throw it into the corner, it's more likely to just kind of stay in that corner, right? Then bounce back to me. And that's kind of how I want you to think of that. Okay, I'm not trying to get too deep here because, again, we're going to be doing a whole series on this, but I want to mention just a couple of other markers. So if your LDL has gone up since entering perimenopause, but your triglycerides are low, If your HDL is good, okay, so if your triglycerides are below 100, I'd love to see them around 80. If your HDL is above a 55, this is one where we really do want it to be higher. If your fasting insulin is normal, optimized, okay, which would be somewhere between 2.5 and a 6. If your inflammatory markers are low, so if that high sensitivity C-reactive protein is below a 1, and you have an NMR that shows that you have predominantly large buoyant particles, that is a very different picture than someone with small, dense LDL in the context of metabolic dysfunction. Okay. Those two women should not be getting the same recommendation from their doctors. Do you see how this conversation is so incredibly nuanced? I know that was a lot of information really quickly, and that's exactly why we're dedicating the entire rest of the month to this topic. So for those of you who sent questions in around this topic, please do stay tuned because I'm going to be giving a lot more info here. The question of cholesterol in midlife is a really big question. And again, the answers just get so nuanced. So there's just so much that goes into it, and it just goes so much deeper than LDL. Okay. So come back next week and the week after and the week after, because we're going to go all the way in on this topic. Okay. Let's go to question number 2. I have had perfect blood pressure my whole life, and now it is starting to rise. Nothing in my lifestyle has changed. What would you look at, and what can I do naturally? Okay. This is actually a very common pattern that I see. And especially when I hear nothing, in my lifestyle has changed, but my blood pressure is rising, my mind goes immediately to the hormonal environment. And I want to explain exactly why, because I think it's going to make a lot of sense. So estrogen, we're talking hormones again, has a very vasodilating effect, okay, meaning it helps keep blood vessel walls relaxed and flexible. Like, okay, is how your blood vessels feel. As estrogen declines, you lose some of that natural vascular support, and blood vessels can become stiffer and less responsive. So now they're just kind of like more uptight, okay? And then progesterone, which actually declines even earlier in perimenopause than estrogen does, has what's called a natriuretic effect, meaning it helps the kidneys excrete sodium. So when progesterone drops, that sodium clearing mechanism becomes less efficient, and some fluid retention can follow. So, which is going to contribute to this elevated blood pressure. So you have two hormones declining at the same time, and both of them were just kind of quietly supporting your cardiovascular system in ways that you never had to think about before. So now here's something I do want to address, because I know that we always hear that we're supposed to reduce our sodium when our blood pressure goes up. And I just want to speak to that, because I hear often like, we're not using salt anymore. We're just using Mrs. Dash and, just garlic, which is all fine and great. But I want to talk about this. Research actually shows that only about 25 to 30% of people are genuinely sodium sensitive, meaning sodium is actually the driver of their elevated blood pressure. So for the rest, sodium is not the primary issue, and restricting it aggressively is not going to move the needle the way that your doctor might expect. Okay. So the better conversation is, why is your vascular system responding this way? And it can get really interesting here. I want to tell you about a gene called NOS3. Okay. I'm going to dabble in a little bit of genetics right now, because understanding your DNA is a really big part of the work we do inside of my academy. And this is actually a perfect example of why I include DNA as part of my program beyond the comprehensive lab work that we do. All right. So NOS3 codes for an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase. And its job is to produce nitric oxide in the lining of your blood vessels. And nitric oxide is one of the primary signaling molecules that your body uses to relax and dilate blood vessels. Remember earlier when I said your blood vessels go, okay, this is what nitric oxide is going to do to them. So when NOS3 is working well, your blood vessels can respond and they can open up the way that they should. When you have certain variants in the NOS3 gene, your body's ability to produce nitric oxide is reduced. And that means your blood vessels have a harder time relaxing, which shows up as elevated blood pressure, okay? Especially when we're under stress, especially chronic stress. And here's why this becomes particularly relevant in perimenopause. Estrogen actually helps upregulate NOS3 activity, meaning estrogen supports nitric oxide production. So when estrogen declines, women with already reduced NOS3 function are going to feel that in their blood pressure more than the woman next to them who doesn't have that variant. The gene was always there, but the hormonal buffer was compensating for it, okay? And when the buffer goes, when that estrogen declines, that underlying vulnerability starts to show up. And this is why you say like, wait, but all of a sudden, if I've always had this variant, why am I all of a sudden having this show up? Well, because all of a sudden estrogen has started declining, okay? And this is where the DNA testing becomes so clinically useful, because if we know you carry the NOS3 variant, we can be very targeted about how we support your nitric oxide pathways. Things like dietary nitrates from leafy greens, from beets, L-arginine and L-citrulline supplementation, magnesium for vascular smooth muscle relaxation, and addressing inflammation that further impairs NOS3 function. Like, these are targeted interventions based on how your body is actually designed. So if your blood pressure is creeping up and you've just been told to cut the salt, it's not always the answer, okay? The better question, again, is what is driving this in your particular body? And maybe you haven't had your DNA testing done, but you have cut the salt and that didn't work for you. And perhaps DNA testing is just not something that's feasible for you to be able to do right now. And that's okay. Even without that, it doesn't hurt to start supporting your nitric oxide pathways. So if you want to hop on something like L-citrulline and see if that helps to move the needle for you, that would be a perfectly reasonable place to start. Okay. At the root of that, L-citrulline isn't going to do a whole lot for you if you are under chronic stress. So we certainly want to make sure that we are taking care of that foundation first, right? We're doing the breathing exercises that we talk about. We're getting the proper sleep at night. Like, we really want to make sure that we focus on those things, and then we incorporate L-citrulline on top of that. All right. Okay. Question number 3. I feel worse after some of my workouts since starting perimenopause, especially the hard ones. Am I doing something wrong, or do I need to change how I'm training? So here is what is usually going on when you feel worse after hard workouts in perimenopause. Like we've been talking about, your hormonal environment is changing. It is running on a higher stress baseline. We have progesterone, which is our calming and our recovery supportive hormone, and it has dropped. Your stress response system is more sensitive than it used to be. And cortisol, which spikes with intense exercise, takes significantly longer to come back down than it did in your 20s and your early 30s. Okay, a hard workout that you used to be able to recover from in 24 hours might now need 48 to 72 hours. And if you decide to train hard again before that recovery is complete, you're now layering stress on top of stress. And over time, that's where we start to see diminishing returns. The more you push through without listening, the less you actually get back in return. And I actually really love this topic because I did this. Like, I lived this. I pushed through. When I was entering perimenopause, I actually, at the time, didn't quite know that I was entering it. Like, I just kept pushing. And the thing is, that's just my personality style. That's just who I am as a person. Even when I was tired, if the alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning and I just felt so exhausted, I still got up. Like, it didn't matter how tired I was. I always pushed through. And that mindset, combined with not understanding what was happening hormonally, would eventually lead me to my adrenal exhaustion diagnosis. And those are really, really hard lessons. So this is where I want to speak to something that I think is really underappreciated, and that is listening to your body when it is asking for more rest. Your body asking for rest is simply data. It is your body communicating something to you. And in perimenopause, that communication deserves a lot more respect than most of us were raised to give it. Okay. See, progesterone is typically the first hormone to start declining as we enter perimenopause. And how we treat our bodies has a real impact on how quickly that decline happens. So here's the connection. Both cortisol and progesterone are made from the same precursor hormone called pregnenolone. And when your body is under chronic stress, including the stress of overtraining and not recovering properly, it prioritizes cortisol production. And here's the thing. When it is prioritizing cortisol, it is producing less progesterone. So overworking, pushing through fatigue, and chronically stressing your system is actually going to accelerate that progesterone decline. Now, progesterone production does not just depend on how hard you train. It also depends on how well you sleep, how much you are eating. Are you under eating? Your body needs adequate sleep to produce hormones. And when sleep is chronically disrupted, progesterone is one of the first things that's going to take a hit. And under eating is very significant here too. I see this a lot with women in midlife who are trying to lose weight by cutting calories, like not realizing that your body needs adequate fuel, including, ladies, adequate dietary fat, okay, in order to be able to produce the raw materials for hormone production in the first place. So if you're overtraining, and remember, overtraining can mean under recovering. Okay, so if you are overtraining and or under recovering, you're under sleeping, you're under eating, all at the same time, your progesterone is going to reflect every single one of those choices. Now I'm going to bring the genetics piece back in here for a minute because this is another area where DNA testing can be genuinely useful. So some people are genetically wired to recover more slowly from training stress. There are specific gene variants that affect how efficiently your body clears exercise-induced cortisol, how efficiently it repairs muscle tissue, and how efficiently it restores mitochondrial function after a hard training session. Now, I happen to be one of those people who requires more recovery than the average person. And knowing that has genuinely changed how I train. The recovery is a very high priority for me now, and it should be for a lot of women in this season, quite frankly. And again, this is another reason why we include DNA testing in the academy. So one of the gene variants I look at is called the COMT variant. And it's one of the enzymes responsible for breaking down stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Okay, after they have done their job. We need the adrenaline, we need the cortisol, but we also need them to go away when they're done doing their job. So women who have a slow COMT variant are going to clear those stress hormones more slowly. So this means after an intense workout, the cortisol and the adrenaline just linger around in their system longer than they would for someone who has a faster COMT. And that is going to directly translate to needing more recovery time between hard sessions, feeling more wired after evening workouts, and just being more sensitive to accumulated stress overall. So if you've always felt like you need more recovery than the people around you, or this has started happening in midlife, it may very well be written into your genes. That's just how your body was designed to work. And these things usually start to show up for us more around midlife. It's just how your mom and dad made you, okay? And the sooner you know that, the sooner you can stop fighting it. So then what type of exercise is best for us in midlife? Resistance training, ladies, lifting weights should be your priority because building and protecting lean muscle mass is the investment that is going to pay off the most right now. But perhaps the intensity and the volume should really match where your body is right now. Okay. Not where it was 10 years ago. Now listen, I want you lifting heavy. I mean, I genuinely do. Don't be afraid to pick up the heavy weights. heavy resistance training is going to support your muscle mass. It's going to support your bone density, your insulin sensitivity, your metabolism in ways that nothing else can touch right now. Remember this, for every pound of muscle you put on, you're burning an extra 50 calories a day. So if we can put on 5 pounds of muscle, now we're burning an extra 250 calories a day simply because we have that muscle on our bodies. And I promise you, that 5 pounds of muscle, an extra 10 pounds of muscle is not going to make you look like Wonder Woman. Okay. But I also want you paying attention to what your body is telling you. If your body asks for a break, I want you to take it. You might not be able to lift weights 5 days a week right now, or you might be able to. Okay. This is really going to depend largely on your genetics, your hormones, where you are right now in this transition. And that's okay either way. For me personally, I find that 4 days a week seems to be kind of my sweet spot. So I like to do a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Sometimes Saturday turns into Sunday. It just depends on what our weekend looks like. And that schedule just works really well for me in terms of getting my weights in, okay, and just still being able to honor my recovery. I will still walk on off days. So it's just something to think about as you are figuring out what works best for you. Now let's touch on HIIT training, high intensity interval training. I do think it has a place, but in perimenopause, I would really limit it to no more than 1 time per week with genuine recovery built in around it. So multiple high intensity sessions per week is simply too much of a cortisol burden for most women in this season. And I see it working against fat loss and recovery consistently. I also want you paying attention to your HRV. And if it's trending low, this is your body asking for a lower intensity day. And I want you to listen to that. We did a whole episode on HRV. Maybe it was in June. So if you're not familiar with that, you can head back and listen to one of those episodes. And last thing on training, if you do still track your cycle, I will say this. The luteal phase, which is going to be the second half of your cycle, is when progesterone is at its peak if it's being produced properly. And everything we just talked about with progesterone supporting our recovery, this is going to be most true in that window, this luteal phase window. So the second half of your cycle is not when you want to be pushing hard. It's not when you want to be doing your high intensity interval training sessions or, going for PRs. That is your window to honor the recovery side of things and let progesterone do its job. Because if you're pushing too hard in that window, you're essentially working against your own hormone production. The cortisol you are generating from intense training is competing with progesterone for that same pregnenolone precursor that we talked about. And your body's going to choose cortisol every time. So you're not just tired, sister. You are actively suppressing the very hormone that's supposed to be supporting your recovery right now. So if you notice that your body is asking for more rest in that second half, that is your physiology doing exactly what it was designed to do. And I want you to listen to it. And I know it's hard because it took me a lot of years to start actually listening to and honoring what my body was asking for. I think about myself listening to this podcast, 10 years ago, and I would just think I was crazy. I would just think there's no way I can keep pushing. I can keep doing it all. And I learned. Proverbs 25:2 says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings is to search out a matter." And I think about that in the context of what every single one of these questions is actually doing. The woman who asked about her cholesterol is not just accepting that her labs are a problem to medicate. She is searching. The woman whose blood pressure is creeping up is not just complying with generic advice. She is looking deeper. The woman who's paying attention to how her body responds to her workouts and asking why, she is searching. And I think there's something just really meaningful in how this verse honors the act of searching, not just finding, the act of asking a better question, of looking past the surface answer, of refusing to accept, quote unquote, "that's just aging," as a complete response. Okay. And I think that's exactly what you're doing every time you show up here. You were not designed to just accept what you've been told about your body without understanding it. You were designed to understand it, and every good question you ask moves you closer to that understanding. So keep searching and know that the one who designed you already knows every answer. Sometimes he just asks us to do the looking. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I had a lot of fun answering these questions for you. And if the cholesterol question spoke to you, make sure you come back next week, okay? And the week after that, and the week after that, because we're going to spend the rest of August going deep on cholesterol as it pertains to women in midlife, okay? It's going to be a really good series. I have a lot to say on this topic, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it with you. If you're thinking seriously about going deeper on the root cause work, including understanding your DNA and how your body was specifically designed to respond to stress, to food, to hormones, to exercise, that is exactly what we do inside my DNA Reset for Fat Loss Academy. I will leave the link in the show notes to the wait list, okay? Enrollment does not open again until early 2027, but being on that list gets you information in the meantime and puts you in line first. And if you have any questions that you would love to hear answered on future Q&A episodes, please send them to me on Instagram at tanya.pennington.miller. I genuinely read every single one. So thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I will see you right back here next week, sister. That's it for today on the Nourish to Thrive podcast. If you found value here, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or send it to someone who's walking a similar path. Keep showing up, keep asking questions, and know that healing is possible, especially when you trust the one who designed your body to heal. Until next time, stay rooted in truth and nourished in grace.